Hey, welcome back to my channel, the Neighborhood Go-To Guy. In today's video, we're going to go over an Ariens 522 snowblower, some reasons why it might not start, and like a quick tune-up. Stay tuned. Now there's three things that every small engine needs to run: fuel, compression, and spark. And the first thing I want to emphasize is always using fresh fuel. If you use fuel from the season before, it might not start or it might run really rough. And to get the cover off this Ariens 522, we're going to take the fuel cap off first. Then we have 10 bolts that need to come out. They're 8mm. One here, one on the other side. 4 down here that you just need to loosen, and then 4 on the opposite side. And once you do that, you can pull the cover off. And the first thing I'm going to inspect is the spark plug boot. And the plug itself. We'll break that loose and take a look at it. And I'm using a 13/16 socket. And that's looking pretty dirty, so either replace it or give it a good cleaning. But if you're just looking to test it into the boot, setting the spark plug against the engine itself and then pulling on the starter string. And if you do that and you see spark, then you know the spark plug is good. And since we're right here, we're going to take this bolt out and then sand that down to make sure we have a good ground. And to remove that bolt, we're going to use a 3/8 socket. And as you can see, there's a little bit of corrosion. That's nice and shiny. We're going to reattach it. And the one thing I want to point out is that you really want to make sure the contact points are clean. That's what we're going for. Now the next thing we're going to check is for compression. And the way I do this is two ways. You can either pull on the string, and if you feel a good resistance, then you know the compression is good. Or if you have a compression gauge kit, you can hook it up once the spark plug is out, pull on the string, and get your compression reading. Now some folks like to put their thumb over the hole itself, and if they pull on the string and feel a suction, they know compression's. So now that we know we have good compression and spark, the last thing we need to check is the fuel. The other thing you can check is the fuel tank itself and make sure there's no obstructions letting the fuel down into the fuel line. So what I'm going to do next is take the carburetor off and give it a good cleaning. The first thing I'm going to do is detach the fuel line, then the primer line, and then the throttle assembly, and the choke. And so I'm going to start on the primer line first. What I like to do on the fuel lines is spray just a little bit of WD-40 to try and get it right around the edge, and then I'll try and pry it back a little bit and then slip it back in, and that way that lubrication gets in there. It should slide off real nice. And we'll want to get this clamp loosened first, and we'll back that off. And I have a drain pan down below if you have fuel in your tank, and then there's a hole down at the bottom and it'll go right into the tank. And before I forget, the one thing you should check is the primer line itself. It could be cracked and it might not be priming fuel into the carburetor. And what we'll do next is pull this old cotter pin from the choke lever. And we want to put our thumb here because we don't want this to bend while we're pulling this out. And once you pull the left side bolt out and loosen the right side, you can drop your carburetor down and detach the linkage. And when you pull the second bolt out, go ahead and drop out your carburetor. And if you had fuel in the tank, there'll be fuel in the bowl, so watch out for fuel coming down. And break this 1/2-inch bolt loose. And as you can see, this bowl could need some cleaning. As you can see, the float's dirty too, so we're going to clean that off. So we'll push the pin out the back. And when you do that, out comes the needle. And we'll be able to get down in here and do a little cleaning. And we'll get our can of carb cleaner and spray it all out. And then put it back together. Check the float and make sure there's no holes in that, because if it does, it'll keep fuel inside the float. And you want to clean every little orifice, every little hole in here, blow it out with carb cleaner. And the last thing you want to do is make sure that these really tiny holes on the bottom of this bolt are cleaned out also. And once you've done that, it's time to put it back together. This is a little trickier than most, but you want to make sure this is all lined up just like that, and then you can drop it back in. It's very important that you get everything lined up just perfectly before you put the pin back in. Put our bowl back on, we'll go ahead and tighten it down and then reassemble everything. Once we reattach our choke cable, our throttle cable, and our 2 fuel lines, we'll put fuel in this and start. The other thing I should mention is check your ignition, make sure their connections are good. Okay, before I put the cover back on, let's start it up. So I'm going to hit the primer 2 times, pull the choke, turn the starter on, and if we did everything right, hopefully it starts right up. And if you learned anything from watching this video, be sure to hit the like button below. I'll see you next time from the Neighborhood Go-To Guy.